Hello, welcome to my introductory video here on the Keepa Amazon Price Tracker tool. The purpose of this video is to just kind of go over the basic features and just to build a foundational base knowledge so that you know exactly what the software is capable of doing and how we kind of use it from day to day. So we actually use Keepa for a wide variety of purchasing and kind of product analysis tasks. So a lot of the stuff we do is kind of looking at this Keepa chart, which you can see on the screen. This actually shows up on Amazon listings and can help us kind of determine trends. So we can look at kind of price action and how many competitors on listing. We can predict if the item's going to sell more or less, or if competition is going to rise or increase. We also use it to determine how much an item sells. This is really important when we're trying to place an order with a new supplier, for example, and we have no previous sales history. We're going to try to use Keepa to predict how much of the product we should buy in general. We also use it for predicting profitability, and so we'll kind of look at the current price and we'll look at historical prices to get an idea of price trends, and we'll see if, okay, maybe the price is kind of elevated right now because competition has decreased, if we can expect that to stay like that, or if we can expect it to come down, kind of looking at stuff like that to determine if a product will be profitable or not. In this video, I'm only going to be covering some of the features that we use consistently because the software is very large and there's a lot of data that you can look at in it. And so I just want to cover kind of the basics of what we find important and what we use constantly. And then, it's expected that over some time you can kind of dig into the other features and see what works for you. But for the most part, I think what we'll cover here will cover the large foundation of what you'll need. So just on another note, Keepa does have an actual website for it too, website application. And so this includes stuff like they have a ton of different features here: track products, data, keep a product finder. This is used more for kind of filtering through products, which more of the sourcing team works with this feature. We won't be covering it in this video, but it is another part of the software that is very important. So now to get into the actual Keepa extension, if we scroll down, the Keepa extension will appear underneath all the listings here. And so you see this graph here. They have multiple different tabs, which has a bunch of different information. And we'll kind of go through these one by one. And then we have this Keepa chart, which is kind of the main central piece of information that we use to kind of look at things quickly and make very quick decisions. And so they do appear on almost every listing, but I chose this one, for example, just because it has a lot of good cases and examples that we can look at throughout this Keepa graph, and just to get an idea of all the different trends that we can see. So I'm going to start by just deselecting all of these different things on the graph so we can go one by one, and then we'll kind of dig through them individually. So the first one here is this green button, and it is this line here, the sales rank. And so the sales rank is basically the rank of the product in its specific category. And so the lower the rank, the more popular and the more the item sells. And so rank 1 in a category would be the top seller. And then as you kind of climb up in ranks, it sells less and less, and it's a less popular item. And so you can see here that the sales rank is dynamic. And so anytime that the product makes a sale, the sales rank will drop. And then anytime some time passes with no sales, the sales rank will slowly climb up and up. So this is kind of a nice example to illustrate this. So this is a seasonal product. It's a weed killer. And so you can expect that sales are very high in the summer and they're pretty slow in the winter. And so when we scroll down here, we can see that in the months between May and June, and also last year when we go all the way back from September back to June, the sales rank was really low, and you see a lot of movement here. You see a lot of sales rank drops, indicating that the product is selling a lot. And then as you move into the winter months, the colder ones where it's, November, October, November, December, all the way back to April, you see that the sales rank has a lot less motion. It climbs to a lot higher of a rank because obviously it's selling a lot less. And you can see kind of the individual drops here as it's selling, really infrequently. Maybe a couple times a month, the sales rank will drop and then slowly climb back up to where it belongs as it's not selling too much. So the second one that we'll get into is this button here, the buy box. And so this kind of shows the price that customers are paying over time. So if I hover over this line, it also shows the seller that was currently in the buy box making the sales. And so that kind of corresponds to up here. This is the buy box where we currently have a price of $22.48, and we have the seller, Deva Beauty, for example. And so if I go right now and I zoom in, we see $22.48 Deva Beauty. And so that's who's in the buy box right now. You can see that a few days ago he's had a price a couple cents higher. He's been kind of lowering it slowly. Just click back to the full year. And then you can go all the way back in time and kind of see what the price has been doing and see the different sellers that have been on the listing. And so this also kind of helps to paint a better picture for what's going on with the sales rank. So you can see that we had, if I turn this off, the sales rank was pretty consistently down here in the 1,000 range, maybe 1,500. And then at some point in December, it looked like it spiked all the way up to 5,000, indicating that it was selling a lot less over here. And so if we turn on the buy box and we see kind of what was going on with the price, it makes a little bit more sense. And so right before, in October, November, the price was at its lowest, around 23.90, and the sales rank was also very low, meaning that the item was selling a lot. Then it looks like for whatever reason the price shot up all the way up to a peak of 37.50 here, and you can see that the sales rank kind of follows that and indicates that there's a kind of a trend there, a little bit of a supply and demand analogy there. The next button we have here is the Amazon button. So if I toggle this on, I actually don't see anything. It must be in the further range, so I'll put it to all time. Yeah, so you can actually see this golden line here, which indicates basically the Amazon price. So sometimes Amazon will actually come in stock on a listing where the brand is selling directly to them, and so they will just appear as another offer in here. Either they'll be in the buy box or they'll be in this other sellers on Amazon, where you can kind of click in and you'll see all the other sellers that are competing on this listing, and sometimes you can see Amazon in here too if we see this golden line here. So the next one we have is this blue button here. This is it's the lowest of the new FBA or FBM offers, not including shipping. For the most part, it will just follow this pink line here, but sometimes it'll dip below because the FBM offer might be a little cheaper, but the buy box is actually still higher. For the most part, it's not too useful, and I tend to just leave it off. Then we have this button here, which is the lowest third-party FBA offer, and so that's these orange triangles here. And so also for the most part, if it's an FBA offer that's in the buy box, these orange triangles will just follow the pink line. But if you kind of go back in time, for example, over here, we have a period of time where it looks like Amazon was in the buy box. They had their price at $14.93 here, and so they were actually, the cheapest price. And then we have some FBA offers up at $26.99 up here. And so it kind of shows the difference between who's in the buy box and where the FBA offer is, if it's not an FBA seller that's owning the buy box at the moment. So same goes for this third-party FBM button here. It'll kind of add these blue dots around the screen. Let me go back to the 1-year chart. So you can kind of get an idea of what's going on here with the FBM offers. Sometimes it'll clog up the listing because they're kind of all over the place like this. And so I also kind of like to leave this off. But if there's ever something that doesn't make sense, or if you're not sure where the buy box went, it might be FBM offer. So be wary of toggling this on and off. But if it's clogging the graph, I like to just leave it like this. And then finally, we have a couple other buttons here. We have list price, eBay used. We also sometimes have like warehouse deals if Amazon is selling some damaged product. For the most part, all these just stay off. They kind of clog the graph, and for the most part, they don't really add much valuable information. So that's it for the top graph. Now we'll get into this middle graph here. If you can't see it here, you can press this subranks button. That'll kind of bring it in and out. You can hide it if you want. So we'll dive into the two different ones here. So we have the first few buttons are basically the same thing as the sales rank above, but it shows the sub ranks. And so if you see where my mouse is hovering here, we have beauty and personal care, which is the main product category, and then we have hairstyling accessories, which is kind of the subcategory. It basically tells you the same information as the sales rank line above, but if you want to kind of dig into how good the product is doing in its specific subcategory, it might be useful to look at this as well. So more importantly, we have this monthly sold feature. So if I toggle this on, we'll see this yellow line, which, like the name implies, it indicates how much the product sells per month. This is a pretty new feature, and so if I put the date range to all time, we won't see it go all the way back. It kind of only started about last year. And this is really important for us. A large part of the role is kind of determining, like I said before, how much a listing might sell. So if we're working with a new supplier and we've never ordered the product before, so we don't have any of our own sales history, we need to look at stuff like this and kind of get an idea of how much the item will sell, and so we know how much we should buy on our first order, so we can start, placing our recurring orders. And so this monthly sold badge, or this monthly sold line here, correlates to this badge up here, which comes directly from Amazon. So that means this data is very accurate. We use a lot of other softwares to also try to get an idea of how much items sell, and they all use different methods of calculating it. So some of them will try to calculate the number of sales rank drops in a period, and so they'll kind of look at how many times this green line goes up and down. But this monthly sold monthly sold line comes directly from Amazon, and so it is very accurate and a good thing to look at when we're trying to determine how much a listing will sell. It also correlates to the sales rank for the most part, so we can kind of see over here back in October when the price was really low and the sales rank was really low, we had the monthly sold at about 800, which is at its peak, and then soon after when the price shot up and the sales rank also shot up, the monthly sold slowly starts to drop off all the way down to 400 and briefly 300 here. So finally we have this third graph here. Again, if you can't see this, there's this button here, show less or show more historical data. And then we have a couple buttons here. So the first two are the ratings and the reviews. And so the ratings is the stars on the listing. So this is a 4.4 stars, just kind of a summary of all the different reviews. You can see the history of that over time. And we also have the review count, which is this 18,000 here, how many reviews the listing has in general. And so for the most part, this thing will just slowly trend up. Sometimes there's a little drop off here because maybe some of the listings or some of the reviews got deleted, they were fraudulent or whatever the case may be, but for the most part this information isn't too valuable for us. More so, we like to look at this new offer count. This is a very valuable piece of information. Let me just toggle away these two. This is basically the number of offers, the number of sellers that are on this listing in any given moment. So that's the number of competitors that are all together competing for the buy box. And so, in this case, we have about 20 offers, and we can see that here. In the other sellers on Amazon, there's 20 new offers for this product. So we're clicking into here, there's all the different sellers. They all have their own separate prices. And so this kind of is the last piece of the puzzle for looking at the trends on a Keepa graph. And so again, you can see back in October when the price was really low, we actually had a ton of competitors on this listing, up to 30 at one point. And so there's a lot of competition, so everybody's undercutting each other and they're starting to lower their price. As a result, the sales went up a lot because more customers are willing to buy the product at a lower price. And then since the item is selling a lot more, a lot of the offer counts started to drop as they're selling out of their inventory. And then as we get down to the bottom here, about only 6 offers, 5 offers, then the price shot up because there was not as much supply and there was much more demand. And so it kind of follows the curve here, and it points to a lot of cool trends that we can look for. So when we open up a Keepa graph, we can look for stuff like this, and maybe if we're in this time period where we see the offer count slowly rising, we can be wary that maybe the price will start deteriorating soon and kind of maybe avoid that product if we're worried that it's not going to make a profit. So that kind of wraps up the chart section, and we'll get into some of the other tabs here. For the most part, if we're just looking at get a quick idea of what's going on in the product, or a quick profitability check, or looking at the trends, this Keepa graph might be all we need. We don't have to usually click into the other offers, but if we're trying to get more details on, for example, how much an item is actually selling, then we might use some of these other features here, which we'll dive into. So the track product feature, we don't use this at all really, so I'll just skip right past it. In this data tab here, we also have product details, which is the first one. This is basically just a summary of all the stuff that we saw in the Keepa graphs. Also not very useful, so I'll also just skip by this. More importantly is this offers tab here. So we look at this a lot. So this is basically a summary of all the different offers on the listing, meaning all the different sellers that are competing at the same time. And then it kind of shows a bunch of different details surrounding them. So it shows their average prices, it shows their price history over time, it shows their stock count here, and so we kind of use this to also determine sales velocities. We also have, obviously their seller name and how long they've been on the listing over here. And yeah, this is very useful. We have a couple buttons here that we can also look at. And so this first button here is to show historical offers. This shows anyone that's been sold out. So when we have this off, it's only the current offers, and then this is anyone who has sold it in the past. If we're trying to get a big picture idea of how much an item is sold over a longer period of time, we need to toggle this on for sure. We also have this show potential scam offers. I just leave it off. I've never seen it really do anything, but I don't want to see scam offers, so I'm going to leave it off. Then we have over here is the date ranges, similar to the Keepa graph, so we can kind of sort through 7, 30, 90, and then go all the way up to the whole history of the product. And then we have some filtering buttons here, so we can kind of hide certain offers. We can show only Prime offers. We can show anyone with free shipping or FBA. And for the most part, when I'm analyzing a listing, I will just toggle on Prime, and I will toggle on historical offers. And this kind of shows people that match our criteria and are similar to the types of sellers that we are. So we sell using Amazon Prime, and I also want to see the historical offers to see who was on the listing before. So using this offers tab, we can actually kind of look at this stock history section, and this is where we get the best idea of how much an item will actually sell. Sometimes the monthly sold number over here is not useful for us because the tiers that they jump to are not as granular. So if we get to an item that sells, for example, in the thousands per month, Amazon's tiers are only 1K plus, 2K plus, 3K plus, and if the product is selling 2,700, it will only say 2K plus, and that difference is large, and we would need to know that. So sometimes we'll want to dive into the offers tab to look at a competitor's stock count and kind of see how fast it was dropping over time. Let me see if I find a quick example here. Like over here, the seller had 117 in stock on March 19th, and they dropped down to 86 on March 31st, and so we can kind of extrapolate that out and to see how much they would be selling over the course of a month. Now that information isn't useful unless we look at this second tab, which is the buy box statistics. So this kind of shows the percentage breakdown of how much of the buy box each seller is getting. And so that means like what percentage of the time are they in this position here where they're getting most of the sales from the customers and not in this other offers section. And so you can see for the last 30 days, this Deva Beauty seller was in the buy box 54% of the time, which they're there right now. And they can kind of just go backwards in time and expand your date ranges and see what the breakdown was previously. And so the combination of this buy box statistics percentage and looking at how much a seller might have sold in a certain time period, you can kind of multiply the two and extrapolate out for the whole listing how much it might be selling in a month. Now in general, for finding a sales velocity, both the Keepa offers method and this monthly sold or looking at the sales badge, both these methods are fine. The sales badge is kind of like a quick and dirty method where you can get the information really fast and you don't have to dig in too deep. And so if you see like 50 plus or 100 plus, the data will be pretty accurate and it'll be pretty close to what is reality. But then when you get into something that says 10K plus, the next jump isn't until 20K plus. And so for those, you might want to dig into the offer count and see how much the listing is actually selling because, if it's at 17,000 a month and Amazon only tells you 10K plus, you're missing out on a lot there and your first order is going to be way off from what the listing actually sells. So now I want to get into some of the special cases and nuances that exist within Keepa and kind of different listings where some of the trends that we were seeing might not work properly and it might mislead us into making the wrong decision. So I think it's very important to understand these and kind of learn how to identify them so we don't let them factor into our decision and make the wrong choice. So in this case, we have this listing here. This is a very high volume listing. You see it says 2K plus bought in the last month. We'll take a look at the Keepa graph. The sales rank, the green line, is very, very low. It's, there's very infrequent spikes, but in general, there's a ton of movement up and down. If you look at the bottom Keepa graph, in the sub ranks, we have rank 1 in smoke detectors for a long time. And then if we look at the monthly sold yellow line, it's consistently selling 2,000 plus. So if we were to look at the offers tab here, we would expect that a lot of the sellers are stocking huge quantities of this, and we should see their stock counts decreasing really quickly. So if I toggle on historical offers and prime to compare to other sellers that are like us, I can even sort by sold, who sold the most. We look at their stock counts and we see a lot of flat lines. And so this seller here is just basically stuck at 16 in stock. This seller here is stuck at 20 in stock. I'll even put it to a larger date range. So again, 16 in stock and infrequently dips below that. This seller here is at 20 in stock and sometimes dips below that. And so, this one's at 9, this one's at 30. And so if you're looking at this and you're looking at these kind of stock counts, it doesn't paint the same picture as what is shown up here, indicating that the product sells so much. And what this is actually order limits. So sellers can implement an order limit on their account and basically not allow customers to buy, more than a certain amount of units. And so that's kind of what this would look like here. And so this seller has an order limit of 16, and so his real stock count could be, in the hundreds. And as it's dwindling down, the only time we see any movement here is when it dips below 16. He sells through, and then he might restock back up to, a couple hundred. And so sellers can do this to kind of hide their stock count from Keepa, because Keepa will pull their stock information from Amazon here, where it shows 20 in stock. But this item or this number is obviously limited to what the seller puts as their order limit on here. So this is an important distinction to make. If you ever see kind of, if you're looking into the offers tab, you're looking into seller stock counts, and we see stuff like this where there's pretty flat lines and maybe like very rapid dips below and then back up to the flat line. This kind of indicates that the listing might have, or the sellers on this listing might have order limits set, and they're trying to hide how much they actually sell. Especially if we see something like this sales badge, which indicates that the product actually does sell a lot more than it looks like. So the next nuance I want to get into is variation listings, and so that's any listing that kind of looks like this. You see if I hover over, there's a ton of different variations under the same listing, and for items like this, they actually share the same sales rank. And so this can kind of be misleading sometimes because we might have a sales rank that looks pretty decent. It looks like there's a lot of movement, but the item may not actually sell as much as it looks like based on the sales rank. And so in this case, we would look at the offers tab. So this is a listing that has a ton of variations here. The sales rank looks pretty decent. You know, it's rank, it goes down to 5,000 in toys, rank 22 in kids crayons, and it looks like there's a lot of up and down movement where there should be sales. But if I go to the data tab and click offers, even if I put on the historical offers and kind of toggle on prime, I can sort by sold and, you know, even put it to full date range. It doesn't look like there's a lot of movement here at all. And so this seller is stuck at 11. That could be an order limit, but it could also just be not selling. This seller here looks like, you know, he stocked a little bit and then he might have removed his inventory. There's very little life in this listing at all. There's not that many sellers. Even when I pressed, you know, historical offers and put it to 365 days, there's still only a couple sellers here where usually we would see tons. And so this is something we have to be careful of. It might look like at a quick glance when we look at a Keepa graph, this listing sells great because the sales rank looks like it's jumping up and down. You know, we can definitely buy maybe 24 or 48 of this to sell in a month. But then if we dig into the offers tab, it actually indicates that there's almost no sales happening here at all. If we wanted to dig into this further, we could probably find the listing out of these variations that is getting all the sales. And so I would guess, I mean, these ones have the Prime badge, so that already means that there's more sellers on there that are selling through FBA. This one is $8.30. This is the cheapest one on here, so probably this one is the one that's the most popular. So you can see right away I clicked into it. We have a 50 plus badge over here, which indicates that there's actually sales. We have a more stable offer count. We have this yellow monthly sold line. And then if I pressed into the offers over here, we would probably see a lot more movement in the stock counts from all the different sellers. Yeah, so we can see right away there's, you know, this seller's stocking 700 and kind of selling through pretty quickly over a few months. And so this is definitely the listing that's attributing to this good sales rank. But all the other variations that are also on this listing are going to be sharing the same sales rank. So this is kind of the opposite scenario. And so in the last one, we had variation listings where the sales rank was actually wrong, but the offer count, when you look at seller stock counts, that is the correct answer, and that shows you that the listing is not actually selling. So in this case, we have a listing that is import, and so we'll see this plus import fees may apply at checkout. This means that a seller actually has all their inventory in a different country, so like they're selling it on Amazon.com in the US, for example, and then they have chosen to have their items shipped to Canada if someone buys it here on Amazon.ca. And so in this case, it's the opposite situation. We look at the sales rank, and there looks to be almost no movement here at all. And you see we have one sales rank drop here in October, and then no sales at all the way until the end of March. And so looking at that sales rank, it'll indicate that there's almost no sales here at all. However, if we look at the data tab and press our offers, we look at these different stock counts, and it looks like there's a ton of movement. So this seller had 400 in stock on May 1st, and he's down 200 units in 12 days. And then we have this seller who sold through his 60 units in about a month's time as well. And so in this case, the offer count is actually the incorrect thing on this listing, and that's because it is tied to their inventory that's also selling in the US. And so we would look at the sales rank chart in this case and see that this actually doesn't really sell. We can validate this. If I switch over to the .com listing, we would see most likely, so yeah, this listing is actually the one that's getting all the sales. This one actually has a 300 plus badge. We even see the same seller, VitaCare, who's in the buy box over here, who's actually also in the buy box over here. And so his inventory is all in the US, and most of his items are selling in the US here, and then he just has it toggled on where he can also ship it to Canada if someone decides to buy it. And so anytime we see this plus import fees may apply at checkout, we got to be careful, and we can't really trust the offers count over here because their inventory is actually shared between the different marketplaces. And so in this case, we would look at the sales rank to determine what kind of sales this item gets. If this item did have like a sales badge or like a monthly sold number here, we can also trust that because that is specific to the marketplace and that comes directly from Amazon as well. And finally, I wanted to jump back to this seasonal listing that we looked at here, the weed killer that was really popular in the summer and not so much in the winter. Seasonal listings will often break the trends that we're used to seeing. And so in this case, in these winter months, obviously the price was very low at $68 because sellers are probably trying to sell through their inventory. And the sales rank was also very bad. The monthly sold is 50 in this section, and then we have the price actually going up to almost $80, and we have the monthly sold jumping up to 400. And so usually we wouldn't be able to, usually that would break any sort of trend that we're used to seeing. We're used to seeing price going down and sales going up. And in this case, it's easy to understand that, okay, it's a weed killer, and so it's seasonal, and we know the demand is going to increase. But for some products, it's maybe less obvious. We might have stuff that's back to school seasonal, like those crayons we were looking at before, where they might actually have a huge spike in September, and you'll see price go up and sales go up. And so if you ever see something that's kind of breaking the trend, maybe there's more of like a macro thing going on, and there's some sort of seasonality, or the product has maybe gone viral or something like that. In summary, I think it's good to be able to kind of look at this Keepa chart and understand it fully and get a really quick idea of what's going on, but also understand the various nuances that could exist, such as an item being imported or variation that might cause this data to be a little off. And it's also important to understand the offers tab here and look at the seller stock counts to kind of get a good idea of how much an item might be selling if the sales badge doesn't exist or if the monthly sold isn't so accurate. But we also need to understand the different nuances that might exist here, such as if it's import, again, the details might be off. So that's basically it for now. I think that'll give a good foundation of what we do for the most part, just for analyzing listings and determining how much something might sell or where the price might go. And that should give us a good foundation of us being able to use it moving forward.